Welcome to a chapter a day. Support our channel by subscribing today. You may not realize this yet, but something inside you has always known that you were meant to see the world differently. Not better than others. Not above others. But awake to things many people move through life without ever noticing. The strange patterns. The quiet nudges. The feeling that your thoughts carry more influence than you were ever taught to believe. Most people grow up learning how to follow systems. How to behave. How to chase success defined by someone else. But every once in a while, a person begins asking deeper questions. Why do certain thoughts feel powerful? Why do some people seem to change reality simply by changing how they think? Why does intuition sometimes feel more accurate than logic? If you're listening to this right now, there's a reason. Because the truth is this. Your life has never been controlled only by circumstances. It has always been shaped by something far more subtle. Your awareness. Your attention. Your identity. And the moment someone begins questioning the patterns that shaped their identity, something powerful happens. They stop living automatically. And they start living consciously. That's what this audiobook is about. Not motivation. Not positive thinking. But understanding the hidden mechanics that quietly shape your decisions, your energy, and your direction in life. Because once you begin seeing these patterns clearly, you realize something extraordinary. You were never powerless. You were simply unaware of how powerful your mind truly is. And over the next few hours, you may start noticing something unusual. Ideas that explain patterns you've experienced your entire life. Thoughts that feel strangely familiar, as if you've always known them somewhere deep inside. By the end of this journey, one realization will become impossible to ignore. You are not here to move through life unconsciously. You are here to participate in creating it. Chapter 1. You were never meant to live on autopilot. There is a strange pattern that many people begin to notice at some point in their lives. At first, it appears subtle, almost invisible. But once someone sees it, they can never completely unsee it again. The pattern is this. Most people are not actually choosing the direction of their lives. They are repeating it. Repeating habits they never questioned. Repeating emotional reactions they never examined. Repeating beliefs that were quietly handed to them years earlier. And because the repetition happens slowly, it often feels normal. Automatic. Expected. But the moment someone pauses long enough to observe their own thinking, a realization begins forming. Not everyone is living consciously. Many people are living automatically. Almost like a program running in the background. You may have seen this pattern before. Maybe in someone close to you. Maybe in the environment you grew up in. Or maybe, if you are honest with yourself, you have noticed moments of it within your own life. A situation repeats. A relationship pattern appears again. A financial struggle seems strangely familiar. And the first instinct most people have is to blame circumstances. Bad timing. Unlucky events. Other people. But every once in a while, a different question appears in someone's mind. A quieter question. A more powerful one. What if the pattern isn't happening around me? What if the pattern is happening within me? This is where awareness begins. And awareness is the first step of power. Let that phrase settle for a moment. Awareness is the first step of power. Because the moment you begin noticing patterns, you step outside of them. And the moment you step outside of them, you gain the ability to change them. Most people are never taught this. Instead, they are taught how to follow systems, how to behave, how to pursue success according to someone else's definition. From childhood, people are shown invisible scripts. Study this subject. Choose this career. Follow this timeline. And slowly, almost without realizing it, many people begin building their lives around expectations they never consciously chose. But something interesting happens to certain individuals. At some point, they begin asking questions. Questions that disrupt the script. Questions like, why do I think this way? Why does this pattern keep appearing? Why do some decisions feel deeply right, while others feel strangely forced? Those questions are not random. They are signals. Signals that awareness is beginning to wake up. And awareness changes everything. You may not have noticed this before, but many of the decisions people make each day are not truly decisions. They are reactions. Reactions shaped by old experiences. Reactions shaped by beliefs formed years earlier. Reactions shaped by identities people learned to protect. Think about something simple for a moment. Imagine two people facing the same opportunity, the same possibility, the same chance to move forward. One person immediately begins thinking about what could go wrong. The other begins thinking about what could become possible. Same situation, different internal program. Different identity, different outcome. And this is where a deeper realization appears. Most people believe their life is shaped by external events. But the truth is often much quieter than that. Life is shaped by interpretation, by perception, by the internal filters through which we experience reality. Those filters are built over time, through repetition, through social expectations, through environments, and eventually, through habit. But habits are not only things we do with our bodies. They are also patterns of thought, patterns of interpretation, patterns of emotional reaction. And when those patterns go unnoticed, they quietly shape the direction of an entire life. But awareness interrupts that cycle. Awareness slows everything down. And when things slow down, something powerful becomes possible. Observation. You begin seeing your own reactions as they happen. You begin noticing assumptions you previously accepted without question. You begin recognizing thoughts that once felt automatic. And every time that happens, a small amount of freedom appears. Because awareness is the first step of power. Now pause for a moment and consider something honestly. How many decisions in your life were made automatically rather than consciously? Not necessarily bad decisions. Just automatic ones. Decisions shaped by what seemed expected. Decisions influenced by fear of uncertainty. Decisions guided more by familiarity than intention. Most people never stop long enough to examine those moments. But conscious creators do. They become curious about their own patterns. Curious about their own thinking. Curious about the invisible forces shaping their behavior. And curiosity is where transformation begins. Because curiosity interrupts autopilot. You start asking questions. Why did I react that way? Why did that idea excite me and scare me at the same time? Why did my intuition say one thing, while my habits suggested another? You may have experienced moments like that before. Moments when something inside you quietly suggested a different direction. An inner signal, a feeling, an instinct. But then something else appeared. Doubt, logic, conditioning, and the original signal slowly faded into the background. This happens more often than most people realize. In fact, many of the most important decisions in life are influenced by this exact moment. The moment when intuition whispers and conditioning responds. Intuition says, "Try this. Explore this. Move toward this." Conditioning says, "That's risky. That's unfamiliar. That's not what people usually do." And because conditioning feels familiar, most people follow it automatically. But the interesting part is this. When someone begins paying attention to those moments, they notice something surprising. Intuition is often pointing toward growth. Conditioning is often pointing toward safety. Neither one is inherently wrong. But one leads toward expansion. The other leads toward repetition. And this is why awareness is so powerful. Because the moment you recognize the difference, you gain the ability to choose. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are participating consciously. Now here is something even more interesting. The moment someone begins observing their own thoughts, their relationship with those thoughts begins changing. Instead of believing every thought automatically, they begin questioning it. They begin examining it. They begin asking a simple but powerful question. Is this thought actually true, or is it simply familiar? And that single question has the power to change everything. Because familiarity can be deceptive. Something can feel true simply because it has been repeated many times. But repetition does not create truth. It creates comfort. And comfort often disguises itself as certainty. But conscious creators are not guided by comfort alone. They are guided by awareness. They observe their habits. They observe their reactions. They observe their emotional patterns. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. And the moment curiosity replaces judgment, learning begins. Transformation begins. A new level of self-understanding begins forming. And that understanding leads to something powerful. Choice. For the first time, many people begin realizing they have more influence over their lives than they previously believed. Not control over everything, but influence over their internal world. And that internal world shapes more of life than most people ever realize. Your thoughts influence your attention. Your attention influences your energy. Your energy influences your actions. And your actions slowly shape your future. Which means the smallest shift in awareness can begin altering the direction of your life. But here is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because once someone begins recognizing their patterns, a deeper question appears. A question that many people have never considered before. What if the patterns shaping your life are not external? What if they are internal? What if the beliefs you learned years ago are quietly influencing your decisions today? What if the identity you've been protecting is shaping the opportunities you allow yourself to pursue? What if the real force shaping your future is the internal program running your mind? Because once you begin seeing this clearly, a new realization appears. The external world may influence your life, but the internal world directs it. And understanding that internal world is where true transformation begins. You've just taken the first step. You've begun noticing the autopilot. You've begun recognizing the patterns. And awareness is the first step of power. But awareness alone is only the beginning. Because once you begin observing your patterns, the next question naturally appears. Where did those patterns come from? What created them? What installed the beliefs, reactions, and identities that quietly guide your decisions. Because once you understand that, you begin unlocking a deeper level of influence over your own mind. You've recognized the autopilot. Now it's time to understand the program running it. Chapter 2. The hidden programming running your mind. If you look closely at your life, you may begin to notice something fascinating. Many of the choices you make each day feel personal. They feel intentional. They feel like they come directly from you. But when someone begins examining those choices more carefully, a deeper layer begins to reveal itself. Because not every thought that appears in your mind was originally created by you. Many of them were learned, absorbed, repeated so often that they eventually felt natural. And once something feels natural, the mind stops questioning it. This is where hidden programming begins. Every human mind develops patterns over time. Patterns of thinking. Patterns of reacting. Patterns of interpreting the world. And those patterns slowly become what we call identity. Identity is not something you are born with. Identity is something you build, piece by piece, experience by experience, belief by belief. From the moment a person enters the world, signals begin arriving from every direction. Parents, teachers, friends, cultural expectations, social rules. And none of these signals are necessarily harmful on their own. Many of them are helpful. They teach survival. They teach cooperation. They teach how to function in society. But here is the part most people never examine. While those signals are shaping behavior, they are also shaping identity. And identity quietly becomes the operating system of the mind. You may not notice this happening while it is forming. But over time, certain statements begin appearing in your thinking. Statements that sound simple on the surface, but carry enormous influence. Statements like, "I'm not very good at that. That's just not who I am. I've never been the type of person who does that." Most people say these things casually, without realizing they are reinforcing invisible boundaries around their own potential. And once those boundaries feel familiar, the mind begins protecting them. You may not have noticed this before, but the mind has a very specific priority. It is not designed primarily to make you successful. It is designed to keep your identity stable. That realization surprises many people. Because most of us grow up believing the mind exists to help us achieve more, to grow, to improve. And in many ways, it does support those things. But only when growth does not threaten the identity the mind has already accepted as true. This is where something interesting happens. If a new opportunity appears that fits your current identity, the mind supports it easily. But if an opportunity challenges that identity, resistance appears almost immediately. Not because the opportunity is bad, not because you are incapable, but because the mind senses something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar experiences trigger protection mechanisms. Protection mechanisms designed to keep identity stable. Imagine someone who has spent years believing they are not a confident speaker. Even if they possess the intelligence, creativity, and insight to communicate powerfully, their identity will resist situations that challenge that belief. They might decline opportunities to speak. They might hesitate when sharing ideas. They might overthink every sentence before saying it. And eventually, the pattern reinforces itself. Not because they lack ability, but because the identity has been quietly directing their behavior. Your identity quietly directs your future. Let that idea settle for a moment. Your identity quietly directs your future. Not your intentions. Not your wishes. Not even your goals. Your identity. Because identity determines which actions feel natural and which ones feel uncomfortable. And most people choose actions that feel familiar, even when those familiar actions produce the same results again and again. This is why some patterns seem to repeat throughout life. A person might set a goal. They might feel motivated for a short time. They might even take action. But eventually something begins pulling them back toward their old behaviors, their old habits, their old thinking. And when that happens, many people assume they simply lack discipline. They assume they weren't motivated enough. But the deeper explanation is much more interesting. The identity protecting itself. Because if the identity believes something like, I'm someone who struggles with money, or I'm someone who never finishes big projects, or I'm someone who avoids attention, then any behavior that contradicts that belief will feel strangely uncomfortable. Not impossible, just unfamiliar. And the mind often prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar possibility. This is why awareness is so powerful. Because the moment someone notices their identity statements, they begin seeing the invisible boundaries shaping their behavior. You may hear these statements inside your own thinking sometimes. I'm not disciplined. I'm not creative. I'm not the kind of person who leads. At first, those thoughts may feel like simple descriptions. But they are more than that. They are instructions. Instructions the mind quietly follows. Every time you repeat one of those statements, you strengthen the identity attached to it. And every time the identity strengthens, your behavior slowly begins aligning with it. Your identity quietly directs your future. But here is something encouraging. Identity is not fixed. It may feel stable. It may feel permanent. But it was built through repetition. Which means it can also change through repetition. New thoughts repeated over time begin creating new internal pathways. New actions repeated over time begin creating new evidence. And slowly, almost invisibly, identity begins shifting. You may have witnessed this process in other people before. Someone who once seemed quiet becomes confident. Someone who once struggled financially learns how to create stability. Someone who once doubted themselves begins trusting their instincts. At first, the transformation seems surprising. But when you examine it closely, you often discover something simple behind it. The person began thinking differently about who they were becoming. And their actions slowly aligned with that new identity. But here is the unusual part. The beginning of an identity shift often feels uncomfortable. Not exciting. Not easy. Uncomfortable. Because the old identity begins resisting the change. Thoughts appear. Doubts appear. Old beliefs attempt to reassert themselves. And many people misinterpret that moment. They assume the discomfort means they are moving in the wrong direction. But often the opposite is true. Discomfort can be a signal that identity expansion is beginning. Because growth almost always introduces unfamiliar experiences. And unfamiliar experiences temporarily disrupt stability. But if someone continues practicing new behaviors, the mind slowly adapts. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. The new identity begins feeling natural. And eventually, the actions that once felt difficult begin feeling normal. This is the quiet process behind many transformations. Small shifts repeated consistently. Small actions reinforcing a new identity. Small choices gradually creating a new direction in life. Your identity quietly directs your future. And once someone understands that, they begin approaching life differently. Instead of trying to force motivation, they begin shaping identity. Instead of focusing only on goals, they begin focusing on who they are becoming. Because goals create temporary effort, but identity creates lasting behavior. And when identity shifts, everything else begins aligning with it. Your thoughts align. Your decisions align. Your habits align. Your environment begins reflecting the new direction. But before someone can reshape identity, they must first understand another powerful force shaping their experience. Attention. Because what you repeatedly focus on strengthens the identity you maintain. Where your awareness goes, your energy follows. And where your energy flows, patterns begin forming. So now that you have begun recognizing the hidden programming running your mind, the next step is understanding something even more powerful. The direction of your attention. Because attention is not just observation. Attention is influence. You have begun recognizing the programming. Now it's time to understand the energy that strengthens it. Chapter 3. Your attention is the most powerful energy you possess. There is a force shaping your experience every single moment of your life. Most people use it constantly, yet rarely think about it. They rarely question it. They rarely train it. But the people who learn to understand it begin noticing something extraordinary. Their perception of life begins changing. Their emotional states become more stable. Their decisions become clearer. And slowly, their results begin shifting. That force is your attention. Attention may seem like something simple. Just the ability to focus on something. To notice something. To observe something. But when you look at it more closely, attention is far more powerful than it first appears. Attention acts like a spotlight inside your mind. Wherever the spotlight shines, that part of reality becomes brighter, more important, more emotionally significant. Imagine walking into a large room filled with hundreds of objects. If a spotlight suddenly illuminates a single chair in the corner, your eyes move toward it instantly. The chair becomes the center of attention, not because it changed, but because your focus moved toward it. Your mind works the same way. At every moment of the day, your attention is highlighting certain thoughts, certain events, and certain interpretations. And whatever your attention repeatedly highlights begins feeling more real, more powerful, more important. You may have experienced this without realizing it. Think about a day when something frustrating happened. Maybe a minor inconvenience, a delay, a disagreement. If your attention stayed focused on that moment for hours afterward, something interesting probably happened. The frustration grew. Your mood shifted. Other small problems began appearing. And suddenly the entire day seemed negative. But if someone asked you later what actually happened, the events themselves might not have been dramatic at all. The emotional intensity came from attention. The spotlight stayed fixed on the problem. And the longer the spotlight remained there, the more powerful the problem appeared. This happens constantly in human thinking. Attention strengthens experience. It amplifies whatever it focuses on. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and walk away with completely different interpretations. One person focuses on what went wrong. The other focuses on what they learned. One focuses on the obstacle. The other focuses on the opportunity. Same situation. Different spotlight. Different emotional result. And this leads to an important realization. Energy flows where awareness goes. Let that phrase settle in your mind. Energy flows where awareness goes. Your emotional energy, your mental energy, your creative energy, they all follow the direction of your attention. Now, this does not mean ignoring real problems. It does not mean pretending difficulties do not exist. But it does mean understanding that the mind has a tendency to magnify whatever receives repeated attention. If someone spends most of their time thinking about limitations, limitations feel larger. If someone spends most of their time focusing on solutions, possibilities begin appearing. The spotlight determines the emotional experience. And emotional experience influences behavior, which means attention quietly shapes outcomes. You may begin recognizing this pattern when you observe people around you. Some individuals constantly notice problems. They see obstacles everywhere. Every opportunity appears risky. Every challenge feels overwhelming. And over time, their lives begin reflecting those expectations. Not because the world is uniquely difficult for them, but because their attention continually highlights difficulty. Other people develop a different habit. They still recognize challenges. They still acknowledge obstacles. But their attention quickly shifts toward possibilities. What could work? What could improve? What could be learned? And because their attention spends more time exploring solutions, they begin discovering more of them. Energy flows where awareness goes. Now here is something even more interesting. Your attention does not only influence external outcomes. It also influences your internal emotional state. You may not have noticed this before, but your emotions often follow the direction of your focus. Think about a moment when you remembered something embarrassing from years ago. Maybe a mistake. Maybe an awkward moment. Maybe something you wish you had done differently. If your attention stayed on that memory long enough, your body probably reacted as if the moment was happening again. Your mood shifted. Your energy dropped. Your thoughts became critical. Nothing in the present moment changed. Only your attention changed. And yet your entire emotional state followed it. This is the power of attention. It acts like a mirror reflecting whatever the mind repeatedly observes. This is what we call the mental mirror. Your attention reflects your inner environment back to you. If your attention constantly scans for problems, the mirror reflects stress. If your attention scans for growth and opportunity, the mirror reflects motivation. Your emotional landscape begins matching the direction of your focus. Which means one of the most powerful habits you can develop is learning to notice where your attention goes throughout the day. Not forcing it. Not criticizing it. Simply observing it. Awareness is the first step of power. You might notice moments when your attention drifts toward worry. Moments when it revisits past mistakes. Moments when it magnifies small frustrations. Those patterns are not failures. They are signals. Signals showing where the spotlight has been trained over time. And once you see those patterns clearly, you gain the ability to redirect them. Not instantly, not perfectly, but intentionally. Imagine pausing during your day and asking a simple question. Where is my attention right now? Is it strengthening something helpful or something limiting? That question alone begins changing how the mind operates. Because attention becomes conscious. And conscious attention is far more powerful than automatic attention. Energy flows where awareness goes. This leads to a simple but transformative coaching practice. Throughout the day, gently guide your attention toward what strengthens your identity and direction. Notice progress. Notice opportunities. Notice small improvements. Notice moments of growth. You are not denying reality. You are choosing where the spotlight shines. Because the spotlight determines what grows stronger in your perception. You may even notice something surprising once you begin practicing this. The more you intentionally direct your attention, the more control you begin feeling over your emotional state. Situations that once dominated your mood begin losing their power. Small frustrations fade more quickly. Opportunities become easier to recognize. And slowly, the mind becomes calmer, more focused, more intentional. But here is something important to understand. Attention alone does not create transformation. It is powerful, but it works together with another force we discussed earlier. Identity. If attention strengthens what it observes, identity determines where attention naturally goes. A person who identifies as someone capable and resourceful will naturally notice opportunities. A person who identifies as someone limited or unlucky will naturally notice obstacles. The spotlight moves according to identity, which means both forces are working together at all times. Identity guides attention. Attention strengthens identity, and together they shape behavior. Energy flows where awareness goes. But here is where the deeper transformation begins. Once someone understands both of these forces, they start seeing a pattern that explains many struggles in life. It explains hesitation. It explains self-doubt. It explains why opportunities sometimes feel strangely uncomfortable. Because there is another mechanism quietly protecting the identity you have been living with. A mechanism that resists unfamiliar change. You have begun noticing your attention. You have begun recognizing the spotlight of your mind. But attention alone is not enough to reshape your life. Something else must shift first. You've learned where your energy goes. Now it's time to understand why the mind sometimes resists directing that energy toward growth. Chapter 4. Why your mind resists the life you want. There is a moment that almost everyone experiences at some point in their life. A moment when something new appears. An opportunity. An idea. A possibility that could change the direction of their future. At first, the thought is exciting. For a brief moment, the mind imagines what life might look like if the opportunity worked. Growth, progress, expansion. But then something interesting happens. Almost quietly, another voice appears. A cautious voice. A voice that begins asking questions. What if it doesn't work? What if you fail? What if you're not ready? What if people judge you? And suddenly, the excitement that appeared only moments earlier begins fading. The opportunity that once felt exciting begins feeling uncertain, heavy, uncomfortable, and eventually, many people step back from it. Not because the opportunity disappeared, but because the internal resistance became stronger than the curiosity. Most people assume this resistance means something negative. They believe it means they are not prepared, not confident enough, not capable enough. But the deeper explanation is much more interesting. Your mind is not resisting growth. It is protecting familiarity. This is a powerful realization. Because once someone understands it, they begin interpreting their internal reactions very differently. The mind prefers familiar problems over unfamiliar opportunities. Think about that idea for a moment. Familiar problems, unfamiliar opportunities. If you look around, you will begin noticing how often this pattern appears. Some people stay in careers they no longer enjoy, simply because the routine is familiar. Some people remain in relationships that no longer inspire them, because change feels uncertain. Some people avoid pursuing their potential, because the identity they have been living with feels stable. Even if that stability includes frustration, limitation, or dissatisfaction. The mind is not always seeking the best outcome. Often, it is seeking the most predictable outcome. Predictability creates a sense of safety, and safety protects identity. So when something new appears that challenges the identity you have been living with, resistance appears. Not as punishment, not as weakness, but as a protective response. Imagine a simple scenario. Two people are offered the same opportunity. Perhaps a new role at work. Perhaps a chance to lead a project. Perhaps an opportunity to start something of their own. The situation is identical, but their responses are completely different. One person feels curious, excited. Even if they feel nervous, they move forward. The other person hesitates, overthinks. They begin imagining every possible reason the opportunity might fail. Eventually, they decide it's safer to wait. Same opportunity, different decision. Why? Because their identities interpret uncertainty differently. The first person sees uncertainty as possibility. The second sees uncertainty as risk. Neither interpretation is irrational. But the interpretation shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. You may have experienced this dynamic yourself. A moment when you sensed something meaningful was possible, but hesitation appeared. Your mind began listing reasons to delay, reasons to stay where you were, reasons to wait for the perfect time. But the perfect time rarely arrives. Because the mind continues protecting the familiar identity. This is where a powerful reframing appears. Resistance is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes resistance is a signal that expansion is beginning. Let that phrase settle into your thinking. Resistance is a signal of expansion. The moment someone begins moving towards something unfamiliar, the mind activates protective mechanisms. Doubt, fear, overanalysis. These reactions are not proof of incapability. They are evidence that something new is being attempted. Something that challenges the old identity. Most people misinterpret this moment. They assume resistance means stop. But the people who grow the most in life learn to interpret resistance differently. They see it as a signal that the edge of their comfort zone has appeared. And beyond that edge, growth becomes possible. Think about any skill you have ever developed. At the beginning, it likely felt awkward, uncertain, unnatural. Maybe it was learning to speak confidently. Learning to manage money. Learning to express your ideas clearly. At first, the unfamiliarity probably created resistance. But as you continued practicing, something changed. The unfamiliar slowly became familiar. The discomfort faded. The identity expanded. What once felt difficult eventually felt natural. That is how growth always happens. Small steps into unfamiliar territory. Repeated often enough that the mind begins accepting the new identity. But the beginning always contains resistance. Resistance is a signal of expansion. Once you understand this principle, hesitation begins looking very different. Instead of asking, "Why is this difficult?" you begin asking a more powerful question. What part of my identity is being challenged right now? That question opens the door to awareness. Maybe the opportunity requires you to see yourself differently. More capable, more visible, more responsible, more influential. And those new identities can feel unfamiliar at first. But unfamiliar does not mean impossible. It simply means new. And the mind takes time to adapt to new identities. The people who experience the most growth are not the ones who never feel resistance. They are the ones who understand it. They recognize the signal. They expect the discomfort. And they move forward anyway. Not recklessly, not blindly, but consciously. They understand that every meaningful expansion in life begins with a moment of uncertainty. And uncertainty is simply the space where new possibilities live. Resistance is a signal of expansion. You may begin noticing this signal in small moments throughout your life. Moments when an idea excites you and scares you at the same time. Moments when an opportunity appears and your mind immediately begins negotiating reasons to delay. Those moments are invitations. Invitations to examine the boundaries of your current identity. Because every identity contains limits. Limits formed by past experiences, past beliefs, past definitions of what feels possible. But identities are not permanent. They are flexible. They expand when new evidence appears. And evidence appears through action. This is where the relationship between identity, attention, and behavior becomes powerful. Your identity influences what opportunities feel comfortable. Your attention influences what possibilities you notice. And your actions slowly reshape both. Each step into unfamiliar territory creates new evidence. Evidence that challenges the old identity. Evidence that strengthens a new one. But the first step often feels uncertain. That is the moment when resistance appears. Not as an enemy, but as a signal. Resistance is a signal of expansion. Once you begin interpreting it this way, something remarkable happens. Fear loses some of its authority. Hesitation becomes information rather than limitation. And growth becomes something you can approach intentionally. You begin understanding that the discomfort you feel when pursuing something meaningful is not proof that you should stop. It is often proof that you are moving in a direction your old identity has never experienced before. And every new identity begins that way. Uncertain at first. Unfamiliar at first. But gradually becoming natural through repetition. Which leads us to an important realization about something many people misunderstand. Confidence. Most people believe confidence is something you must feel before taking action. But the truth is often the opposite. Confidence rarely appears before the first step. It appears after the first step. After the second. After the 10th. Confidence is built through evidence. Evidence that your identity is expanding. And once you understand this process, you stop waiting for confidence to arrive before acting. You begin realizing that action itself is what creates confidence. You've learned why resistance appears. You've learned that the mind protects familiarity. You've learned that resistance is a signal of expansion. But the next insight changes how people approach growth entirely. Because the moment you truly understand how confidence is created, hesitation begins losing its power. The moment you understand this, confidence begins forming differently. And that realization opens the door to a new way of approaching opportunity, growth, and identity. Chapter 5. Confidence is created after action, not before. There is a belief that quietly holds many people back from pursuing the life they imagine. It sounds reasonable at first. It even sounds logical. The belief is this: I'll take action once I feel confident. It feels responsible, careful, even wise. But when you observe how confidence actually forms in real life, something surprising becomes clear. Confidence rarely comes first. Confidence comes later. After action. After effort. After experience. Yet most people reverse the order. They wait for a feeling that only appears after they begin. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics of personal growth. Because the mind wants certainty before movement. It wants reassurance before risk. It wants emotional safety before change. But growth almost never begins that way. Growth begins with uncertainty. Think about a moment when you first tried something unfamiliar. Maybe it was speaking in front of a group, starting a new job, learning a skill that once felt intimidating. At the beginning, confidence was probably absent. Your thoughts might have been uncertain. Your body might have felt tense. Your mind may have questioned whether you were capable. But something happened once you began. You gained experience. Small pieces of evidence began appearing. You realized you could handle more than you initially believed. And slowly, confidence formed. Not as a sudden burst of courage, but as a quiet accumulation of proof. Proof that you were capable of learning. Proof that mistakes were survivable. Proof that uncertainty could be navigated. Confidence did not arrive before the action. Confidence arrived because of the action. Yet many people spend years waiting for a feeling that only appears after they move forward. You may have experienced this pattern yourself. Perhaps there was an idea you once felt drawn toward. A project you considered starting. A direction you thought about exploring. But something inside you said, "Not yet. I need to feel more ready. I need to feel more confident." And so the idea remained in the background. Days passed. Months passed. Sometimes years passed. And the opportunity slowly faded into the distance. Not because you lacked ability, but because the mind was waiting for evidence that could only appear through action. This pattern happens more often than people realize. Someone delays sharing their ideas until they feel confident speaking. Someone delays pursuing a passion until they feel confident in their abilities. Someone delays making a meaningful change until they feel confident in the outcome. But confidence is not a prerequisite for growth. Confidence is a byproduct of experience. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. Let that phrase settle into your thinking. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. Every time you take a step towards something unfamiliar, your mind receives new information, new evidence, new proof that your identity may be larger than you previously believed. And each small action begins shaping a new internal narrative. Instead of thinking, "I'm not the kind of person who does this," the mind begins noticing, "Maybe I am." That shift may seem small at first, but identity changes are often subtle in the beginning. They appear through repeated experiences, Repeated actions. Repeated moments of courage. You may not feel dramatically different after the first step, but the mind remembers the evidence. And evidence is powerful. Imagine someone who has always believed they are not confident speaking in front of others. For years, they avoid situations where they might need to present their ideas. Their identity becomes reinforced. I'm just not good at that. But one day they decide to try something small. Perhaps they speak briefly in a meeting. Perhaps they share an idea they normally would have kept silent. The moment passes. Nothing catastrophic happens. And suddenly the mind receives new information. Evidence. Maybe the experience was not perfect. Maybe their voice felt slightly nervous. But they survived it. That single moment becomes a reference point. The next time a similar opportunity appears, the mind remembers the evidence. You've done this before. And slowly, action reshapes identity. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. This is why small actions are often more powerful than grand intentions. Because intentions create possibility. But actions create proof. And proof reshapes identity. You may begin noticing this pattern when you reflect on the skills you already possess. At some point in your life, those skills felt unfamiliar, uncertain, possibly intimidating. But through repetition, they became normal. Driving a car once required intense focus. Now it happens almost automatically. Communicating your thoughts once required effort. Now conversations flow naturally. The unfamiliar became familiar through action. Not through waiting. Not through endless preparation. Through practice. Through experience. Through repetition. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. Now here is an important realization. The most powerful actions are not always the biggest ones. They are the consistent ones. Small identity-shifting actions repeated daily. A decision to speak up. A decision to begin something. A decision to try again after a setback. Each of these actions creates evidence. And evidence slowly reshapes the story your mind tells about who you are. That story matters more than most people realize. Because identity determines what feels natural. Once an identity shifts, behaviors that once felt difficult begin feeling normal. Someone who identifies as a writer writes regularly. Someone who identifies as a leader takes initiative. Someone who identifies as a learner seeks knowledge naturally. The behavior aligns with the identity. But the identity often begins with action. This is why waiting for confidence can quietly delay transformation. Because confidence appears after evidence. And evidence appears after action. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. You may even notice something interesting once you begin practicing this principle. The fear you once felt before taking action begins decreasing. Not because fear disappears completely, but because your mind begins recognizing a pattern. Each time you act, you survive the experience. Each time you act, you learn something. Each time you act, your identity expands slightly. And over time, the unfamiliar begins feeling familiar. Confidence slowly emerges. But here is another important layer to understand. Action alone does not always create lasting transformation. Someone might take action occasionally. They might try something new once or twice. But if their deeper identity remains unchanged, the old patterns often return. This is why some people make progress temporarily, then fall back into old habits. Because the surface behavior changed briefly. but the deeper identity remained the same. True transformation happens when action and identity begin reinforcing each other. When actions repeatedly support a new self-image. When behaviors provide consistent evidence of growth. That is when identity begins shifting permanently. Action teaches the mind who you are becoming. And when identity changes, behavior follows naturally. But this raises an important question. How does someone consciously reshape their identity? How do repeated actions transform into lasting internal change? Because identity does not change through action alone. There is another mechanism involved. A deeper internal loop that gradually rewires how the mind sees itself. Once you understand that mechanism, you gain a new level of influence over your growth. You stop relying on motivation. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. And you begin designing the identity that shapes your future. You have learned that confidence appears after action. You have learned that action creates evidence. And you have learned that evidence begins reshaping identity. But action alone does not create transformation unless something deeper shifts. And that deeper shift reveals the true engine behind lasting personal change. Chapter 6. You become the identity you repeatedly practice. There is a quiet law shaping human behavior that most people never notice. It operates silently, consistently, day after day. And once you begin recognizing it, many of life's patterns suddenly start making sense. The law is simple, but powerful. You become the identity you repeatedly practice. Not the identity you wish for. Not the identity you talk about. The identity you practice. Every action you take sends a message to your mind. Every behavior becomes a small piece of evidence. And over time, the mind gathers that evidence and constructs a conclusion. This is who I am. That conclusion becomes identity. Identity is not something you declare once. It is something your behavior proves repeatedly. Most people assume identity is fixed. They believe it was shaped in the past and cannot easily change. But identity is actually more fluid than it appears. It evolves through repetition. Every repeated behavior strengthens a particular version of you. Imagine someone who decides to begin exercising. The first day may feel uncertain. The body resists. The schedule feels inconvenient. The mind might whisper small doubts. This won't last. You've tried this before. But if the person continues anyway, something interesting begins happening. The second workout feels slightly less foreign. The third feels slightly more normal. After a few weeks, a subtle shift begins occurring. The person no longer thinks only in terms of exercise. They begin thinking differently about themselves. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to get in shape," they begin saying, "I'm someone who works out." That change in language may seem small, but psychologically, it represents a powerful shift. The identity has begun changing. Behavior created evidence. Evidence reshaped self-concept. And once self-concept changes, behavior becomes easier to maintain. This is the identity upgrade loop. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence reshapes identity. Identity influences future behavior. The loop continues strengthening itself over time. But here is the key detail many people overlook. The loop works in both directions. If someone repeatedly practices behaviors that reinforce limitation, the identity adapts accordingly. If someone repeatedly practices behaviors that reinforce growth, the identity expands. Your mind is constantly observing your actions, quietly asking one question: what kind of person behaves this way? And whatever answer appears most consistently becomes your identity. This is why repeated actions matter more than occasional bursts of motivation. Motivation can inspire a moment. Repetition creates identity, and identity shapes long-term behavior. Your mind defends the person it believes you are. Let that phrase settle for a moment. Your mind defends the person it believes you are. Once the mind accepts an identity, it begins protecting it. If the mind believes you are disciplined, it becomes easier to act with discipline. If the mind believes you are resilient, challenges feel manageable. If the mind believes you are capable, opportunities feel approachable. But if the mind believes you are limited, hesitant, or incapable, it will defend those beliefs just as strongly. This is why identity upgrades require consistency, not perfection. Consistency, because consistency gives the mind repeated evidence. And repeated evidence becomes truth in the mind's interpretation of who you are. Think about someone who identifies as a writer. They do not necessarily write perfectly every day, but they write consistently. The behavior reinforces the identity, and the identity makes the behavior natural. Now consider someone who occasionally writes, but does not see themselves as a writer. Even if their skill level is high, they may struggle to maintain the habit, because identity and behavior are not aligned. The mind protects the identity it believes is true. Your mind defends the person it believes you are. This is why small identity-shaping actions are incredibly powerful. They may appear insignificant at first. A short daily practice, a small commitment, a simple behavior repeated consistently. But each repetition strengthens a new internal narrative. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who learns. I'm someone who grows. Over time, those internal narratives become stable. And once they stabilize, your behavior begins aligning automatically. The effort decreases. The resistance fades. What once required discipline becomes part of who you are. This is how identity upgrades truly occur. Not through dramatic declarations, but through quiet repetition. Now here is something important to understand. Identity does not change instantly. The mind is cautious when adjusting its self-concept. It requires evidence, consistent evidence. But once that evidence accumulates, identity shifts become surprisingly powerful. You may notice this in people who undergo significant transformations. Someone who once struggled with self-doubt begins trusting their decisions. Someone who once avoided responsibility begins leading confidently. Someone who once felt stuck begins creating new opportunities. From the outside, it can appear like a sudden transformation. But internally, the shift usually occurred gradually. Small behaviors repeated over time. Small actions reinforcing a new identity. The identity upgrade loop quietly doing its work. Behavior, evidence, identity, reinforcement. Your mind defends the person it believes you are. Now imagine consciously participating in this process. Instead of waiting for identity to change randomly, you begin designing behaviors that reinforce the identity you want to grow into. You start asking a different kind of question. What would the future version of me do today? Not in dramatic ways, but in small, repeatable ways. Maybe the future version of you reads regularly. So you read a few pages each day. Maybe the future version of you takes initiative, so you begin volunteering ideas more often. Maybe the future version of you prioritizes physical and mental health, so you establish simple daily habits that support that identity. Each action becomes evidence. Each piece of evidence strengthens the new self-concept. And gradually, the identity becomes real. Not imagined. Not aspirational. Real. You become the identity you repeatedly practice. But there is another important element influencing this process. An element many people overlook entirely. Because identity is not shaped only by internal behavior. It is also shaped by external environments. The people around you. The conversations you hear. The energy you absorb from your surroundings. All of these elements influence the identities you reinforce. Which means protecting your internal growth requires awareness of something beyond your own actions. It requires attention to the environment that surrounds your mind. Your mind defends the person it believes you are. But your environment quietly influences who that person becomes. You've begun shaping your identity through consistent behavior. You've learned how the identity upgrade loop strengthens who you are becoming. But there is another factor that determines whether those identity upgrades flourish or quietly fade away. Because even the strongest internal shifts can weaken in the wrong environment. Identity upgrades require something most people overlook. And understanding this next principle will protect the transformation you've begun creating. Chapter 7. Protect your energy like it shapes reality, because it does. There is something quietly shaping your thoughts every single day. Something influencing your mood, your motivation, your clarity, and even your sense of possibility. Yet most people rarely notice it. They rarely question it. They rarely protect it. That force is your energy. Not just physical energy, but emotional energy, mental energy. The internal atmosphere in which your thoughts live. Every thought you have, every decision you make, every action you take is influenced by the state of that internal environment. And that internal environment is influenced by something many people overlook. Their surroundings. The people they interact with. The conversations they hear. The information they consume. The emotional climate they spend time inside. All of these elements quietly shape the quality of your thinking. Because human beings are naturally receptive to the emotional signals around them. You may have experienced this without realizing it. Imagine walking into a room where two people are arguing. Even if you were in a calm mood before entering, you might feel tension almost immediately. Your body senses the emotional atmosphere. Your mind begins reacting to it. Now imagine entering a space where people are focused, positive, and collaborative. A different emotional environment appears. Your energy begins adjusting again. This process happens constantly in human interaction. We absorb emotional signals from our surroundings. Sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. And over time, the environments we spend the most time in begin influencing our identity. This is why certain environments inspire growth while others quietly drain motivation. This is why some conversations spark new ideas while others reinforce old limitations. This is why protecting your energy becomes essential for anyone pursuing transformation. Because your environment trains your identity. Let that phrase settle into your awareness. Your environment trains your identity. The thoughts you hear repeatedly become familiar. The beliefs expressed around you begin shaping your expectations. The emotional tone of your surroundings slowly becomes your baseline. If someone spends years in an environment where negativity dominates conversations, their mind may begin expecting negative outcomes. If someone spends time around individuals who constantly question possibilities, doubt becomes normalized. But if someone spends time in environments that encourage curiosity, growth, and problem solving, their thinking begins expanding naturally. Your environment trains your identity. This is not about judging people. It is about recognizing influence. Every environment contains signals. Signals about what is normal. Signals about what is possible. Signals about what kind of person someone becomes within that environment. Over time, those signals accumulate, and the mind adapts to them. You may have noticed this pattern when reflecting on different periods of your life. Perhaps there was a time when you were surrounded by people who encouraged growth. Your thinking expanded. Your confidence increased. Your actions became more ambitious. Then perhaps there were other periods when the environment felt heavier, more skeptical, more resistant to change. And during those times, motivation felt harder to sustain. The difference was not only inside you. The environment was influencing your internal energy. Your environment trains your identity. This realization becomes especially important when someone begins upgrading their identity, because new identities require supportive environments. Imagine someone who decides to pursue a new direction in life. They begin developing new habits, new ways of thinking, new ambitions. But if they remain in environments that constantly reinforce the old identity, tension appears. Their internal growth begins conflicting with external expectations. And that conflict can slow transformation. Not because growth is impossible, but because environments exert powerful influence. This is why conscious creators learn to protect their energy intentionally. They become aware of the emotional environments they spend time within. They observe how certain conversations influence their mindset. They notice how certain environments affect their clarity. And once they see those patterns, they begin making adjustments. Not necessarily drastic ones, but intentional ones. They spend more time in environments that encourage expansion. They seek conversations that inspire insight. They create physical spaces that support focus and creativity. Because environment influences identity. Your environment trains your identity. Now, this does not mean avoiding every challenge or disagreement. Healthy growth often involves encountering different perspectives. But it does mean recognizing when environments consistently drain your energy rather than strengthen it. And choosing how much influence those environments have over your thinking. This awareness leads to a powerful coaching practice. Begin observing the emotional environments around you. Notice how certain conversations affect your thinking. Notice how certain people influence your energy. Notice how certain digital environments, news, social media, constant negativity, affect your mental clarity. You may discover patterns you had never fully noticed before. Some environments elevate your thinking. Others diminish it. Some interactions leave you feeling inspired. Others leave you feeling exhausted. Awareness is the first step of power. Once you see these patterns clearly, you gain the ability to shape your environment more intentionally. Perhaps that means spending more time reading ideas that challenge and expand your thinking. Perhaps it means engaging in conversations that explore possibilities rather than limitations. Perhaps it means creating daily rituals that protect your mental clarity. Moments of quiet reflection. Moments of learning. Moments of focused effort. These small environmental shifts create powerful effects over time, because identity develops inside environments, and environments influence energy. Your environment trains your identity. Think about the environments that naturally support the identity you are building. If you are becoming someone disciplined, what environments encourage discipline? If you are becoming someone creative, what environments stimulate creativity? If you are becoming someone resilient, what environments reinforce resilience? Designing supportive environments does not require perfection, but it does require awareness and small intentional choices. Over time, those choices shape the emotional atmosphere surrounding your growth, and that atmosphere strengthens your identity. You may even notice something interesting once you begin protecting your energy more consciously. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your decisions become more aligned with your goals. Your attention becomes easier to direct, because the noise that once disrupted your focus begins fading. Energy stabilizes. Clarity increases. And when clarity increases, something powerful begins happening. You start trusting your own thinking more deeply. You start relying less on external approval. You begin making decisions based on internal alignment rather than external pressure. That shift is subtle at first, but over time, it becomes transformative. Because when someone learns to stabilize their energy and protect their mental environment, their identity strengthens. Their attention becomes sharper. Their actions become more intentional. And eventually, something remarkable happens. They stop waiting for permission to pursue what feels meaningful. They stop waiting for validation before trusting their own insight. They begin realizing that their life direction does not require constant external approval. When your energy stabilizes, your clarity increases. When your clarity increases, your confidence strengthens. And when your confidence strengthens, you begin seeing life through a very different lens. Because the next stage of growth requires something many people never fully develop: the willingness to trust your own inner authority, to move forward without constant permission, to follow insight even when others may not fully understand your direction. You have learned how identity forms. You have learned how attention directs energy. You have learned how environments shape identity. Now the next realization becomes possible. When your energy stabilizes, something unexpected begins happening. You begin recognizing that the most powerful decisions in your life will come from trusting your own thinking. And that realization leads to a profound shift in how conscious creators approach opportunity, purpose, and growth. Chapter 8. The moment you stop seeking permission. There comes a moment in the life of every conscious creator when something inside them begins to shift. It does not happen loudly. It does not arrive as a dramatic announcement. Instead, it appears quietly, almost like a realization that was waiting patiently to be noticed. For most of life, people are taught to look outward before they move forward, to seek approval, to wait for validation, to ask whether something is acceptable before deciding whether it is meaningful. From an early age, this habit becomes deeply embedded. A child raises their hand before speaking. A student asks if their answer is correct. An employee waits for direction before acting. And while structure and guidance have their place, something interesting often happens over time. Many people begin carrying this pattern far beyond the environments where it was originally necessary. They wait for approval before pursuing ideas. They seek validation before trusting intuition. They hesitate to act unless someone else confirms their direction. And slowly, almost without realizing it, they begin outsourcing their authority. The authority over their decisions. The authority over their creativity. The authority over the direction of their life. But conscious creators eventually recognize something important. The most meaningful directions in life rarely come with universal approval. The ideas that change a person's life often appear before others understand them. The instincts that guide someone toward growth often arrive quietly, long before the world recognizes their value. And at some point, a realization begins forming. Waiting for permission can quietly delay your destiny. This is the moment when a person begins shifting from external validation to internal alignment. They begin trusting their own thinking more deeply. They begin recognizing that insight does not always need immediate confirmation. And they begin making decisions based on something deeper than approval. Alignment. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. Let that phrase settle into your awareness. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. Because the more someone practices trusting their insight, the stronger that insight becomes. It is similar to strengthening a muscle. At first, the movement may feel uncertain. But with repetition, confidence develops. History offers many examples of individuals who reach this moment of realization. Moments when they chose to follow alignment rather than permission. Moments when they trusted their thinking even when approval had not yet arrived. Consider the countless innovators, creators, and visionaries who began their journeys with ideas others initially questioned. People who saw possibilities where others saw risk. People who sensed potential where others saw uncertainty. In the beginning, their decisions may not have made sense to everyone around them. But they moved forward anyway. Not recklessly, not arrogantly, but with quiet conviction. Because something inside them felt clear. And over time, that clarity shaped their actions. Those actions produced results. And eventually, the world recognized the vision that once seemed uncertain. But the recognition came later. Long after the original decision had been made. The decision that required no permission. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. You may have experienced moments like this yourself. Moments when an idea appeared in your mind. A direction that felt meaningful. A possibility that seemed aligned with who you were becoming. But before you acted, you began asking others what they thought. Some people offered encouragement. Others expressed doubt. Some simply did not understand. And gradually, their perspectives began influencing your confidence. This is natural. Human beings are social by nature. We seek connection. We seek understanding. But the challenge appears when external opinions become louder than internal insight. When the voice of the crowd becomes stronger than the quiet clarity within you. Because the crowd does not live your life. The crowd does not experience your inner calling. The crowd cannot fully see the vision forming inside your mind. Only you can sense that. Only you can feel that alignment. And alignment often appears before validation. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. This does not mean ignoring wisdom from others. It does not mean rejecting advice or feedback. But it does mean learning to distinguish between helpful guidance and unnecessary permission. Helpful guidance expands perspective. Unnecessary permission delays action. Conscious creators learn to listen carefully to both. They gather insight from others. but they do not surrender their internal authority, because the final decision always returns to alignment. What feels meaningful? What feels purposeful? What direction resonates with the identity you are becoming? These questions guide action more effectively than approval ever could. You may begin noticing something interesting once you practice this shift. The more you trust your thinking, the more your thinking evolves. Your mind becomes sharper. Your intuition becomes clearer. Your ability to recognize meaningful opportunities strengthens. Because clarity grows through use. Every decision you make based on internal alignment strengthens your self-trust. And self-trust is one of the most powerful qualities a person can develop. When someone trusts their own thinking, hesitation decreases. Overanalysis fades. They begin moving through life with greater intention. Not rushing. Not forcing outcomes, but moving steadily in directions that feel meaningful. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. Now here is something fascinating about this shift. When someone stops seeking constant permission, their creative potential expands dramatically. Ideas flow more freely. Decisions happen more naturally. Opportunities appear more frequently. Because the mental barrier of approval no longer blocks forward movement. The mind becomes open, curious, exploratory. This does not mean every decision will be perfect. No one experiences life without mistakes. But mistakes are part of learning. And learning strengthens clarity. Over time, the person who trusts their thinking becomes wiser through experience. More aware of patterns, more skilled at recognizing opportunities, more confident in their direction. Clarity grows when you trust your own thinking. And something remarkable happens when this self-trust becomes stable. Your identity begins shifting again. You no longer see yourself as someone waiting for approval. You begin seeing yourself as someone capable of guiding your own life. Someone capable of recognizing meaningful paths. Someone capable of making thoughtful decisions even in uncertain circumstances. That identity creates freedom. Freedom to explore ideas. Freedom to pursue purpose. Freedom to shape your future consciously. But with that freedom comes an important realization. When you stop seeking permission for your life, you begin recognizing that your actions influence more than just your own path. Your growth inspires others. Your courage encourages others. Your example demonstrates what becomes possible when someone lives with intention. And that realization introduces a deeper understanding of purpose. Because purpose is rarely limited to personal achievement. Purpose often expands outward, influencing the lives of others in ways you may never fully see. When someone lives with clarity and alignment, their presence itself becomes powerful. Their decisions ripple outward. Their growth creates space for others to grow. And this realization opens the door to a much larger perspective on life. You have learned how identity forms. You have learned how attention directs energy. You have learned how action builds confidence. You have learned how environment shapes identity. And you have discovered the power of trusting your own thinking. But something even more profound emerges when all of these principles come together. Because the moment someone begins living consciously, their influence extends far beyond their personal results. This shift unlocks a deeper realization about purpose. A realization that transforms the way conscious creators see their role in the world. But this shift unlocks an even bigger realization about purpose. Chapter 9. You are here to influence more than your own life. There is a realization that many people reach after they begin living more consciously. At first, the journey feels personal. It begins with self-awareness, with observing patterns, with questioning beliefs, with reshaping identity. The focus is internal. How you think, how you act, how you grow. And for a while, it may appear that the transformation is only affecting your own life. Your mindset becomes clearer. Your decisions become more intentional. Your confidence grows gradually through action. But something interesting begins happening over time. Something subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The changes inside you begin influencing the world around you. Without speeches, without persuasion, without trying to convince anyone, your presence begins creating a ripple. Human beings influence each other far more than they realize. Not only through words, but through energy, through behavior, through the quiet signals of how someone lives their life. People are constantly observing one another. Not always consciously, but constantly. They observe how someone responds to challenges, how someone handles uncertainty, how someone speaks about their goals, how someone treats others. And these observations shape perception. Perception shapes inspiration. And inspiration shapes possibility. This is the ripple effect. Every action sends a signal. Every habit communicates something. Every decision demonstrates a standard. And those signals travel farther than most people realize. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. Let that phrase settle into your awareness. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. You may have experienced this influence at some point in your life. Perhaps there was someone whose behavior inspired you. Not because they told you what to do, but because of how they lived. Maybe it was someone who stayed calm during difficult situations. Someone who approached challenges with curiosity rather than fear. Someone who pursued their goals with quiet consistency. You noticed something about them. Something that made you think differently about your own potential. And without realizing it, their example shifted your thinking. That is the ripple effect of conscious living. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. Now imagine this principle applied to your own life. Every time you choose growth over comfort, someone notices. Every time you remain calm during uncertainty, someone observes it. Every time you pursue a meaningful goal despite hesitation, someone sees what courage looks like. You may not always know who is watching. You may not always see the impact. But influence travels quietly. Through example. Through presence. Through consistency. This is why personal growth is never truly personal. Your transformation becomes part of the environment others experience. Your mindset becomes part of the emotional atmosphere around you. Your behavior becomes a demonstration of what is possible. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. Think about a person who approaches life with curiosity. They ask questions. They explore ideas. They learn continuously. Without intending to, they often inspire others to become curious as well. Curiosity spreads. Now consider someone who approaches challenges with resilience. They encounter difficulties. They adapt. They continue moving forward. Others observe that resilience. And suddenly, challenges appear less intimidating. Because someone demonstrated that perseverance works. This is how influence operates. Quietly. Consistently. Often invisibly. But powerfully. You may not realize how many people are affected by the example you set. Friends, family members, colleagues, even strangers. Sometimes a single interaction can plant a seed in someone's mind. A seed of possibility, a seed of courage, a seed of curiosity. And seeds grow over time. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. This understanding creates an important shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "How do I convince people to change?" you begin asking, "How can I embody the values I believe in?" Instead of persuading others through argument, you influence them through example. Because people are more likely to believe what they see than what they hear. They trust lived experience more than spoken advice. And when someone consistently demonstrates clarity, integrity, curiosity, and growth, others naturally become curious about that way of living. This is the essence of conscious influence. It is not forceful. It is not manipulative. It is simply authentic, living in alignment with the identity you are building. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. Now here is something fascinating. When someone begins living this way, their sense of purpose often expands. At first, the focus was personal transformation, becoming more aware, becoming more intentional, becoming more aligned with meaningful goals. But eventually a larger realization appears. Your life is not only about what you achieve, it is about what your life demonstrates, what your actions represent, what your presence communicates to others. Your journey becomes a signal showing that growth is possible, that clarity is possible, that conscious living is possible. And when others witness that signal, they begin reconsidering their own assumptions. They begin wondering what might be possible for them as well. This is the ripple effect of conscious living. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own experiences. Think about the people who influenced you the most. Were they always the loudest voices in the room? Or were they the individuals whose actions quietly demonstrated strength, wisdom, and authenticity? Chances are, their behavior left a stronger impression than their words ever could. Because behavior is evidence. And evidence changes perception. Now imagine becoming that kind of influence in your own environment. Not by trying to impress anyone. Not by trying to control anyone's thinking. But simply by living consciously. By practicing the principles you have been learning throughout this journey. Awareness. Intentional attention. Courageous action. Identity growth. Environmental awareness. Self-trust. When those principles guide your life, something remarkable happens. Your influence becomes natural. You inspire others without trying to inspire them. You encourage growth without forcing it. You create possibility simply by embodying it. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. And this realization leads to something even deeper. Because when someone understands the ripple effect of their actions, they begin thinking differently about the future. They begin asking bigger questions. Not just, what kind of life do I want to live? But, what kind of impact do I want my life to create? That question expands perspective. It shifts attention beyond immediate outcomes. It introduces the concept of legacy. Not necessarily fame. Not necessarily recognition. But influence. The quiet impact your choices create over time. The ideas you share. The example you set. The encouragement you offer simply by living authentically. And once someone begins thinking in those terms, their approach to life changes dramatically. Decisions become more intentional. Values become clearer. Actions align with a deeper purpose. Because they recognize that every day offers an opportunity to influence the world around them in positive ways. Through integrity, through resilience, through growth. The strongest influence is lived, not spoken. You have learned how awareness creates power. You have learned how attention directs energy. You have learned how identity shapes behavior. You have learned how action builds confidence. You have learned how environment influences growth. You have learned how self-trust unlocks clarity. And now you have discovered how your life influences others. But all of these realizations point toward one final insight. One idea that brings everything together. Because once someone understands their identity, their energy, their influence, and their purpose, a powerful question appears. What kind of life will you intentionally design? And this leads to the most important realization of all. The realization that conscious creators do not simply react to life. They design it. Thoughtfully, intentionally, purposefully. And that understanding opens the door to the final chapter of this journey. And this leads to the most important realization of all. Chapter 10. Design your life with intention. There is a quiet power in approaching life as a canvas rather than a checklist. Most people move through life reacting to circumstances, responding to emails, obligations, and external pressures, without ever stepping back to see the full picture. They wake up each day, follow routines, solve problems as they arise, and hope that somehow, by accident, life works out in their favor. But conscious creators operate differently. They understand a fundamental truth. Life is most powerful when approached intentionally, as a deliberate act of design. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. Let that phrase settle in. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. It is not about controlling every outcome. It is about shaping the structures that guide outcomes. About establishing habits that align with values. About crafting environments that reinforce clarity, focus, and growth. When you begin seeing life this way, a profound shift occurs. Suddenly, your attention is no longer scattered. Your actions are no longer random or reactionary. Your identity becomes the foundation upon which decisions are made. And influence flows naturally. You begin connecting the dots. Awareness leads to identity. Identity leads to action. Action leads to influence. This is the reinforcement loop that underpins every successful transformation. Awareness, identity, action, influence. Each step strengthens the next. Each decision becomes an intentional brushstroke on the canvas of your life. Consider your relationships. Do they support your growth? Do they challenge you in ways that strengthen resilience, curiosity, and integrity? Or do they reinforce old patterns, doubts, and limitations? Intentional creators examine these dynamics carefully. They design interactions, boundaries, and communities that encourage the identity they are cultivating. Consider your work and purpose. Does it align with the legacy you wish to leave? Does it provide opportunities for growth and meaningful impact? Or is it simply a set of obligations that drain energy and dilute intention? When life is approached as design rather than reaction, the distinction becomes clear. Your decisions, relationships, and environments are no longer passive, they are purposeful. You may notice moments of discomfort along the way. Resistance often appears when the old identity clashes with intentional action. Your brain prefers the familiar. It prefers scripts. It prefers autopilot. But now, you have learned how to recognize these patterns, observe them, and move through them with awareness. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. Every habit, every decision, every environment becomes a tool for shaping the life you truly desire. Long-term thinking emerges as a natural extension of this approach. You begin asking questions like, what kind of person do I want to become over the next 5 years? What relationships and experiences will support that evolution? What legacy will my actions leave behind? And with each answer, life begins to feel less like a series of random events and more like a carefully constructed journey. This is not about perfection. It is about alignment. About consistent, intentional effort. About building a life that reflects your highest identity, values, and purpose. Every principle you have learned so far, the awareness of patterns, the attention to energy, the trust in your own thinking, the courage to act, the recognition of your influence, converges here. All of it points to one central truth: life is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you co-create with intention, focus, and clarity. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. And once this truth becomes real, your perspective on life shifts profoundly. You see opportunities where others see obstacles. You sense potential where others see limitations. You operate from purpose rather than obligation. You influence others not by force, but by example, presence, and alignment. The most powerful realization emerges: life is not measured by what you survive. It is measured by what you intentionally create, by the environments you cultivate, by the identity you embody, by the influence you leave behind, by the meaning you weave into every action and interaction. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. Pause for a moment and reflect. Your attention is a spotlight. Your identity is a foundation. Your actions ripple outward. Your influence shapes more than your own life. And now, you are ready to weave all of these threads together. To step fully into the life you were meant to live. To design it with intention. To craft a future that reflects your highest self. Because the journey you have taken is not simply about learning principles. It is about becoming the person who can live them. And that is the ultimate truth of conscious creation. Your life is yours to design. Every choice, every action, every relationship, every thought. Make it intentional. Make it purposeful. Make it expansive. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. And with that understanding, the journey does not end. It begins. You mastered patterns. You reclaimed your energy. You trusted your thinking. You embraced action. You recognized your influence. Now, you create. Not by chance. Not by accident. But by design. Your life. Your canvas. Your creation. A conscious creator lives by design, not default. And now, the question is yours. How will you design the life you were always meant to live? In closing, something remarkable happens when a person begins seeing their own patterns clearly. Not judging them. Not fighting them. Simply noticing them. Because the moment awareness enters the picture, change becomes possible. Throughout this journey, you may have recognized moments from your own life. Times when intuition whispered but logic argued. Moments when hesitation disguised itself as caution. Situations where you sensed your potential, but weren't sure how to trust it. And that's the deeper message behind everything you've heard. You were never meant to move through life unconsciously. You were meant to participate in shaping it, to question patterns, to observe your thoughts, to choose your identity intentionally rather than inheriting it automatically. Most people never realize this. They believe circumstances define them. But conscious creators discover something different. Circumstances influence life, but awareness directs it. Your attention directs your energy. Your identity directs your behavior. And your behavior quietly designs your future. Which means something extraordinary is always possible. A single moment of awareness can begin shifting the direction of an entire life. So as you finish listening, there is one question worth asking yourself. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Right now. If your identity truly shapes your future, who are you choosing to become? Because the moment you decide that intentionally, your life stops happening to you, and you begin creating it.